Well, greetings to all the guests signed in here this evening, and a warm welcome to this event that is being hosted by the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter, especially for the International Coaching Week 2021. And it is my absolute pleasure to be your host for this evening. Please do take a moment to announce yourselves in the chat box. We love to see the variety of people who have come in, and your name, your location would be lovely to have. Now, to set the context of what this evening's about. So this evening is one of the 1,000+ global events being organized by the members of the International Coaching Federation as a part of its 22nd International Coaching Week. During these 7 days, thousands of coaches in their own way put in an extra effort to evangelize coaching in their communities, with the objective that we make coaching get that much closer to becoming integral to society. Having said that, with all that's happening within our beloved city of Mumbai and the world over, it was debated whether we should have this event or not, whether we should postpone it or not have it at all. Coaching is a tool that empowers a client to be in the now and building a desired outcome from there, from here. It is considered as the preferred personal and organization development tool world over. So more than ever before, this being a time when all people sparing no spectrum of society are collectively experiencing rapid change in the way life is panning out, making us feel insecure, anxious, and unsure of what lies ahead. Coaching can help us defy these challenging times, anchor us, and reconnect us with our inner strength to adapt with agility, find clarity, and float with the tide or take flight despite the odds. And while we get geared for the panel discussion, we are also aware that there are several members of the audience that may be new to coaching. To create a somewhat level playing field or level learning field, shall I say, our first segment brings you a primer in coaching. And for this, we have our chapter's member coach, Shripad Ranade. So he is an ACC and a CPC, an accredited ICF credentialed leadership coach and a management consultant. He helps people and organizations achieve their true potential. He is also the director of corporate partnerships at the ICF Mumbai chapter. With that, I request Shripad to go ahead and make his presentation.
Thank you. I will start off right away by contextualizing why we are having this primer. Priya, as you rightly said, what we are trying to recognize is that we have, of course, some coaches here today, but we also have people who got curious about coaching very recently. And we want to do our best to make sure that all of us are well positioned to understand the panel discussion that follows. And that's really why we are going to take you through a very quick 101 of coaching. And as we start that, we thought that the first thing we could do is to really ask you what you expect from a coach. So if you have hired a coach before, or if you are planning to hire one, what is it that you would expect to come from that coach into your life? And I'm going to request my colleague Anu to just share a poll for all of us to complete. That poll would come up now. And we're asking you a simple question. What is it that you expect from your coach? There are lots of options here, 9 options to be precise. And you can pick as many options as you like. Just choose that, and you will have to press submit at the end. In case that doesn't appear on your screen, you would have to scroll down a bit. So just choose as many expectations as you have from a coach and hit submit. Let's see what we are all saying. We'll give you about say 10 seconds or maybe more. And let's see what comes in. And the reason we want to do this is really for all of us to understand that there are a lot of ways in which coaches can help, and there are some ways in which coaches can't help, and there are good reasons for that. So we thought that we would start from there. Adu, if we have several votes already coming in, we could soon close the poll.
I think let's give it another 20 seconds. Yeah, we have close to about 72% voted. So ladies and gentlemen, if you could take another 10 seconds and give as many answers as possible.
72% already tells me that this is a very tech-savvy audience.
Yes.
Fastest finger first.
We're touching 80%. So would you want me to close the poll?
I think we can, because we're not really doing a census, but let's just have a sense of the house, closing and showing the poll results.
All right. There you go.
Wow. So I'm blessed with an audience who already knows what I'm going to say, because I'm seeing that asking me questions that make me think is what the topmost expectation is from a coach. But what is interesting is that there are several other things that we're also looking for. About a fourth of us have said that I should get some new ideas or suggestions. Many of us have said that I should equip me to deal with the present and plan my future, and so on and so forth. So we are going to touch upon this a little bit more as we go along. But this is interesting food for thought for coaches and clients alike who are attending today. So Anu, if we close that, we will go ahead and we'll tell people a little bit more about what we have to say today. Thank you. I really want to start by recognizing the special times that we are in. Our theme today, of course, is to defy challenging times. And it makes sense for us to start that way and really recognize that we are at a very precious and at a very particular moment in history. At a very unique moment in history, as the American author Bruce Feiler says here, probably for the first time after the Second World War, we are all going through a life transition together. And what a transition. As we go through this transition, I'm sure many of us are saying that when we look back, we are going to have bittersweet memories, and we are going to tell our children and our grandchildren that we lived through some exciting, momentous times. But it's also equally true that on a day-to-day basis, there are several things that we are going through. And so let's recognize those as well. And whether you are an employee or a leader in an organization, or for that matter, even if you are a person who is retired from a profession, or a businessman yourself, or perhaps a teacher or a student or a homemaker, I believe all of you will see here things which are happening to you. This is the day-to-day reality for all of us. And when we put it out there and we recognize that for ourselves, as Priya said, we wondered whether we should be having this event today. And we said we definitely should, because it makes coaching even more relevant. And let's see how. When we look at these realities, what we are essentially saying is that there is change happening all around us. And the last 1.5 years as well have been for reimagination. Even if you are in a large organization, you are being told to have a startup mindset. If you haven't been doing it so far, you want to put people at the core. There's of course the joke going around on social media about how it isn't the CEO, it isn't the CDO, but it is really the pandemic which has been responsible for transforming companies digitally. And then of course, those of us who deal with customers are aware that that has changed completely. There are completely new customer journeys we are having to design. And irrespective of what you're managing, whether you're managing yourself, your home, or a company, you're noticing that you're having to act with a lot of urgency, but at the same time, be very agile. And what does all of this mean to us? As we look at this reimagination, as we look at this change, and we understand what we do with it, a very big question that comes in front of us is, what is our relationship with that change? And that exactly is what coaching is about. Do we just tolerate change? Do we see change as a necessary evil? Or do we thrive in change? Do we transform our equation with change, embrace it, understand it for what it is, and maximize our own potential? And if we are to do that, the next thing to ask is, who can help us do that? And there are two gentlemen here who think everyone needs a coach. So let's see what they have to say rather than me.
Everyone needs a coach. It doesn't matter whether you're a basketball player, a tennis player, a gymnast, or a bridge player. My bridge coach, Sharon Osberg, says there are more pictures of the back of her head than anyone else's in the world. Sorry, Sharon. Here you go. We all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve.
Over the years, I've received so many different kinds of advice, I don't know where to start. One that comes to mind is to have a coach. our board member in 2002, John Doerr, said, "You need a coach." And I said, "Well, I don't need a coach. I'm an established CEO. Why would I need a coach? Is something wrong?" He said, no, you need a coach. Everybody needs a coach." So Bill Campbell became my coach and has served Google very well. Every famous athlete, every famous performer has somebody who's a coach, somebody who can watch what they're doing and say, "Is that what you really meant? Did you really do that?" They can give them perspective. The one thing people are never good at is seeing themselves as others see them. A coach really, really helps.
So quite a resounding endorsement for coaching as a profession. But let's see for a moment how we got here. Some interesting history. As you can see on the top left here, what you see obviously is a horse carriage. And for hundreds of years, if you wanted to go from point A to point B, you could walk, but you could go there faster, safer, and someone could help you. And you just got into a horse carriage. And that is how the word coach actually entered the English language. It was simply something that took you from point A to B. So that's one idea, that something that takes you from A to B is a coach. The second, as you can see in the thumbnail or the bottom left, this is this lady who's called over two students for tea, presumably. And this is what started happening over the last couple of 100 years at campuses such as Oxford, where in addition to professors, the students would go once a week and meet someone called a tutor. And the tutor was no longer telling them new information. The tutor was just telling them something, or rather asking them questions around where they are today, where they would like to be next week, and what would help them to get there. So the idea that you could sometimes get people to move along by asking them rather than telling them came from there. And then midway through the last century, psychotherapists, in particular Carl Rogers, whose book you see here, came up with the idea that it's not that much the tools and techniques of therapy, but the nature of the alliance between the therapist and his client, which really matters. And he came up with the idea of client-centered therapy, specifically for therapy, but also the general idea of person-centered, helping. And what he meant by that was, it really matters what the quality of relationship, the level of trust, and so on is between the person helping and the person being helped. Another major thing that happened in the history of coaching was, say, around 1974, there was this beautiful book that came out, and you see the tennis ball there because the book was called The Inner Game of Tennis. And what happened is that there was this gentleman called Timothy Galway who said, you win or lose first between your ears before you win or lose outside on the tennis court. And he spoke a lot in that book about how your conscious and your unconscious self fight with each other. And if you can tame that, then you've got it made. So if you see all these four, they are all pointing towards some of the elements of coaching as we know it today. And then there were people like Thomas Leonard, who's pictured here, who brought it all together. He started coach training formally in the early 90s. And by 1995, he and others established what is now the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. And in fact, that is how the logo down there reads 25 years, because just last year at ICF, we celebrated 25 years of the coaching industry, having turned into a profession. Now, when we speak about a profession, and I've been mentioning the word profession repeatedly, let us understand why we call it a profession. Of course, it's possible to coach someone without training. It's possible to not be held to standards. But if one is supposed to be a professional coach, then what one does is one goes through a rigorous accreditation process. For example, what I did was I applied for a credential at the ICF, and I was given a credential. So all the coaches that you see here today have one of the ICF credentials, such as an ACC, a PCC, or an MCC. But before we did that, we went to school. We went to a coach training school, which was approved by the ICF. So a bit like the maker-checker concept, or a bit like a university and a college, you first do the internal exam, but then you also apply for the university degree. That ensures that each of us have the same understanding of coaching competencies. We can lose our credential if we do not engage in continuing education, and we sign up for the code of ethics. So if you ask me, what has the ICF done for coaching globally? I would say, as a coach, it ensures that when you speak to someone and they say they're an ICF credentialed coach anywhere in the world, you know that you're speaking to a fully trained coach who's held to some standards. And since I'm speaking so much about the ICF, let me share a little bit about the ICF itself. Something like 45,000 ICF members across countries. So clearly the largest global member network of professional coaches. And you will notice the numbers there. Out of the 34,000 people around the world who are credentialed, there are about 1,000 in India, which means that we need more coaches in India. So all of us have the same foundational level of coach-specific training. We are bound by the code of ethics. And in India, we are organized by city chapters. And of course, as you know, today's event has been organized by the Mumbai chapter. What has the ICF done in terms of standardizing coaching is that it has, first of all, come up with a very clear and standard definition of what coaching should be. And there are 4 essential elements to what that definition is. The first is that the coach partners with the client. And what we mean by that is that the coach does not say, I am here and you are here. The coach says we are equal partners and we will together walk this journey. The second is that the process of coaching itself leads to provoking your thoughts, your feelings, and your creativity so that you come up with newer insights. Another essential element of coaching is that you are left inspired, you are not left bogged down. And by all these coming together, the last and most important element takes shape, which is that your potential, whether it is a professional or your personal potential, that is maximized. All of this, of course, comes down to one single definition: partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. And when we define coaching like this, it's also very important to understand what coaching is not. Because many a times what happens is that when one person is helping another, they may call it coaching. But help comes in many shapes. All of it is welcome. So we need to understand when it is coaching and when it is not. As the hands on the top left show you, there are many ways to help, but not all of them are coaching. And each of those ways of helping are valid, and all of them have their own place. But it's important for both the person helping and the person getting helped to know what is going on. So when you call it coaching, that's the same definition which was there on the previous slide. It's partnering, it's asking. However, instead of looking at the windscreen, if you and the person helping you are together looking at the rear view mirror, you're healing pain and you're trying to feel better, that's counseling. And if someone is telling you, look, I have done this before, I can help you by telling you what to do, that's mentoring. And it's important, but it's not coaching. Of course, if you put it together as a set curriculum and you impart someone knowledge or skills or behavior, whatever it may be, but you know what you're going to offer and the other person is there to take it, that's training. And last but not the least, the last of the sister professions which are also into helping is where you look at more of the organizational context and you say, look, I know something better, so let me tell you. Or you say, I didn't know it till yesterday, but you asked me to, so I've gone around and I found out what the best practice is. This is how the most successful people or companies do it. That's consulting. So it's important to understand that help comes in many forms and some of it is coaching. Now let's move to, if it is coaching, what do we do with it? And today we are going to focus specifically, because we have the panel discussion coming up, on coaching as a leadership tool. And as Priya also mentioned earlier, we are calling it a tool. Once upon a time in organization development and L&D, we used to call coaching and others as interventions. But an intervention really is something you do when something is going wrong and you fix it, right? But a tool is what you use when you're building and you're developing. So we call it a leadership tool and not a leadership intervention. And as a tool, what should it do? It should, of course, answer the most pressing questions that leadership has today. And these really are those questions. The first two are quintessential questions which leaders have been grappling with over the last, say, 150 or 200 years. The third question is what we are asking today as the nature of leadership changes. The last one is something that was on the shorelines, but today we are very much in the midst of it. How do we manage our well-being? The good news is that coaching is a flexible tool, and it can actually help leaders grapple with all of these 4 questions in 2 ways. One is by creating new ideas, and the other is by focusing on wellness. And that sounds a little counterintuitive, right? I said not necessarily that the coach tells you or gives you new ideas. But what coaching does do is that it primes the brain, because it creates a space to allow the mind to flow, and you discover on your own some aha moments or light bulb moments, which therefore give you ideas which you take forward. And the other is wellness. Sometimes people ask us, oh, we are not focused on productivity now, we are now focused on wellness. Should we still use coaching? Of course you should, because inherently coaching embeds wellness, because if well-being is about realizing your potential while coping with stresses, then coaching is exactly the solution. As coaching does both of these things, we start looking at ways in which we can use coaching. Now, you see here some behaviors for which people hire coaches, because behavior is what you can see. So typically, we find that coaching is more or less hired often for behavioral shifts. And in fact, as you look at this, I would encourage you to start putting in the chat box, and then we will look at that after about 5 minutes. You could start putting into the chat box, what is it that you would like to hire a coach for? What scenarios do you think of that a coach? And as you start putting that into the chat box, let's look at some of the scenarios that are already on this slide here. It's not my case that everything on the right is better than everything on the left, and you might make choices. But let's take one example. For example, there is a plate on the left which says avoids risks, but there's one on the right which says risk taker. And perhaps you are getting someone else coached, and you are saying that because that person is in marketing, the person needs to take some bold new decisions to increase market share, but the person is too risk averse, it's just not working. What happens when that person sits down with a coach? What happens is that the coach does not stay at the level of behavior. What you want in the proverbial iceberg that you see here is results, increase market share. What you want is actions, taking bold actions. The behavior you are therefore wanting to instill is moving from risk averse to risk taking. But as the proverbial iceberg always tells us, there's a lot happening under the water. So when the coach and client explore that, what they find is that the behavior of being against risk could be from a feeling maybe of fear. And it could be that underlying that, there is a thought that I should never fail, because if I fail, there will be problems. And the belief could be that failing is bad and I should always succeed. And where should that come from? A belief that I should always succeed and always be appreciated could come from a value of self-respect. Now, all of us have a value of self-respect. And in fact, going one step further, we also have the value that we also have the need of being accepted, of being loved, of being liked. But some of us, to be liked and to be respected, will go in the direction of saying, I will never fail, and hence I'll never try. And some will say, I need to succeed, and I will try out anything that is required for it. So that is where the coach and the client will work. And what you see is what is outside the water, which is the change of behavior. As we understand this, therefore, in our mind, if you look at it as a continuum, really we are saying that you could just coach on skills such as communication skills, or you could use coaching for something deeper. You could change performance. And sometimes the person comes back to you, if you are hiring coaching for someone else, they come back to you and say, I have really developed as a person. And sometimes they say, my life has changed. I'm transformed. And that is the true power of coaching. Now, I will just turn to our chat box.
Yeah, there's some
Priya,
exciting noise here in the chat box, Shripad. There is somebody has said, achieve a goal, paradigm shift to scale up, helps to see beyond one's known potential, make a decision, career transformation. We need to manage these polarities. With the dichotomy you have depicted, the CEO cannot be a coach as well. Somebody says a comment that is to get over some blocks. Then yeah, there's a lot of comments about how lovely your presentation is going, Shripad. Apart from that, I think working inside out, managers with mental blocks. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And this makes our task easy, right? Because we were all sitting together and putting together some scenarios, and we thought we would put that up and tell you what coaching is for. But I think the chat box is as good a reference for that, right? So I'll anyway flash what we have, which matches quite well with what has already been said. So these are some typical coaching scenarios. And if you are thinking of whether coaching is good for you, have a look at this. So it could be something as fundamental as enhancing communication, which you see on the top left, but it could be something more complex. It could be something counterintuitive, like using conflict. Do you want zero conflict? Do you want everything to be swept under the carpet? Or do you want to use conflict creatively? Or it could be what you're seeing in green down there, which is transforming your culture, which is not going to happen with a single person getting coached. Or it could also be something on the other end of the spectrum, very personal, something like taking responsibility. Yeah. Sometimes people say this, A doesn't take responsibility, B is reliable. And that's where a coach can come in. So there really is a very wide spectrum, Priya, of things that coaches can do. And
Yeah.
I will not say too much about this because I think
Yeah.
our panel has a lot to say.
Yeah.
I will just leave everyone with one final comment from me, which is why coaching works. And this is really all data from an ICF global survey from a few years ago. And look what they found. They found that almost everyone who gets coached is satisfied with the experience. So the simple answer to the question, how has coaching grown so rapidly, is because it works. And it works for everyone. Increased productivity, people are more positive, and there's return on investment. And of course, we are happy to share more detail about this and other surveys because the ICF has been conducting these surveys over the last, I think, 12 years at least. And happy to share more about that. But that's all from me here. I hope all of us have more of a level understanding of what coaching is. And Priya, back to you. Thank you.
Wonderful, Shripad. Thank you so much for that crisp introduction to coaching, a visual delight, like many people have said, and so beautifully and meaningfully shared and succinctly explained. Very nice. So moving on, we go on to the next section now of our event today, which is the panel discussion. And for that, let me start by introducing our moderator for the evening. Patricia Mathews, or Pat as we fondly call her, is the president of Mathews Associates, a coaching and consulting practice dedicated to supporting leaders as they build productive partnerships, teams, and workplaces. Pat has had many years of healthcare experience, including clinical, management, and educational roles in acute care, outpatient, and educational settings, and has won several awards. She has achieved the status of Master Certified Coach with the International Coaching Federation and is currently the chair of the ICF Global Enterprise Board. Pat received the ICF Global President's Award in 2013 for her work on developing the PCC markers, and she was inducted into the ICF Circle of Distinction in 2019. May I request Poonam to please spotlight Pat for us right now? We done that. Great. Our next introduction is to our set of panelists, and we start with Dr. Velumani Arokiaswamy. He is the promoter, chairman, and managing director of Thyrocare Technologies. He was born as a farmer and then went on to work as a scientist at BARC. He became an entrepreneur in 1996, and now he calls himself a storyteller. His journey from a small village to the National Stock Exchange is very impressive. His organization serves in more than 10,000 PIN codes in 10 countries and employs more than 22,000 direct and indirect workforce. He believes that focus gives success, frugality is luxury, pain gives pleasure, risking gives success, leader creates leaders, and money is not about happiness. Welcome. Can we have Dr. Velumani spotlighted? Is he there? There he is. There he is. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Our next panelist is Rajaram Narayan. He is the managing director of Sanofi India Limited. In his current role, he oversees the group operations of the company in India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, covering 5,000 employees across 3 factories and multiple commercial locations. His experience includes diverse categories across healthcare, telecom, consumer goods, and services in India, as well as Asian markets. His earlier roles included senior assignments as vice president at Hindustan Unilever Limited and chief marketing officer at Bharti Airtel. He is an alumnus of the Advanced Management Program at Harvard Business School. Rajaram is also a board member of Apollo Sugar, an organization of pharmaceutical producers of India. Welcome, Rajaram. Our next panelist is Hepzibah Pathak. She is currently the vice chairperson and chief client officer of Ogilvy India and a member of the Ogilvy India board. She has lived advertising for nearly 26 years. 23 of these years have been with Ogilvy. Prior to her current role, she was global brand director, national advertising head, and ran Ogilvy Mumbai, Ogilvy India's flagship office, for nearly 5 years. She has been honored as one of the 50 most influential women in media, marketing, and advertising in India by Impact for the last 5 years consecutively. Her colleagues know her for her love of music and movies. Now, that's a person I love. She attributes much of the good stuff that has happened to her to adopting Steve Jobs' advice to young students: stay hungry, stay foolish. Welcome, Hepzibah. Our next panelist is Mr. Arvind Prabhat Shankar, the Managing Director of India for Capita. He's a global business transformation and operations leader and has extensive experience in business operations, planning, and management, with history of growing business through change management, operating model development and program execution for organizations such as Capita PLC, Accenture PLC, Prudential, Talisma Corporation. He is also the board member of the ICF Chennai Charter Chapter, should I say, and an ACC coach accredited by ICF. Prasenjit is the CEO of Great Place to Work Institute in India, whose vision is making India a great place to work for all. He is a sought-after speaker who has written many research papers and over 100 articles on all aspects of creating high-trust cultures that deliver sustained business results. He has set up successful businesses that include Great Place to Work Institute in Sri Lanka, Great Place IT Services Limited, and the Great Manager Institute. He has close to 3 decades of experience in Indian and multinational corporations like HSBC, Aisha Consultancy Services, Siemens, and Crompton Greaves. And with that, now, Pat, over to you to take away this panel discussion.
Thank you, Priya. It's my pleasure to be here, especially with such distinguished panelists. And I've actually been following all of the comments in the chat box. And so I'll say distinguished attendees as well. And the first presentation was really useful and helpful, both about ICF and about what coaching is. So I'm going to be asking each of you the same question first, and you'll have 5 minutes to answer this question. I'm going to go alphabetically. So Arvind, we're going to start with you. And the question, and it relates to the theme for this International Coaching Week, is your views. Share your views on how you've defied challenging times.
So defying challenging times in the current context, Pat, as we all know, around the ecosystem around us, really there's lots going on, lots of unfortunate events happening. All of us play multiple roles as leaders, as family members, as parents, as colleagues, and as friends. So defying challenging times really right now is about keeping your presence, being present for people around you, be it your colleagues, be it your team, be it your relatives, be it your friends, or be it for anyone reaching out and needing some help. It's about being grateful. It's about being mindful. And I think this is the time when really being present is much more important. It's less about the future. It's less about the past. It's more about being here and now and being available to everyone. So to me, that's what it's really, personally, and both as a leader, on the professional front and on the personal front, it's all about being present. And a part of it is also taking care of yourself, because like we say, it means in the aircraft, unless you put on the oxygen mask for yourself, you can't take care of others, right? So it's really about, unless you are well, unless your mental well-being is taken care of, unless you are fighting fit, you can't really take care of others. So I think it's finding that balance. And of course, there are ups and downs through the days that we go through, but it's really about being cautiously optimistic, doing your bit, and be as available to everyone and be as present as possible.
Great, thank you so much. Presence is really the key, one of the keys to what you said, and taking care of yourself is a message as well. So thank you, Arvind. Hepzibah, you're going to be next.
Hi, everybody. So happy to be here. I was reflecting on what Arvind was saying, and I think that one of the things that's helping me manage through challenging times right now is really all the development and the investment I've made in emotional intelligence. Because I think it's the emotional intelligence that I have that's helping me through, a lot of the things that are happening right now. One of the things that I think is truly important right now is self-awareness and the ability to listen. And I think this was some of the skills that I invested in, through my career, both organizational as well as my own personal investment. And I think the ability to connect, to the quality of your listening, your ability to be supportive, listen for support, supportive listening, reflective listening, listening for insight, listening for possibility. I think that has really been able to build a quality of connection, because we are obviously struggling in a virtual world. We're all working from home, and in our business, really, it's all about co-creation, collaboration, customization, imagination. We're a people business because we're a creative organization. And I think that ability to be able to build that quality of connection is something that has been that has helped us in the last 18 months to actually manage through all the crises and all the issues that have come up. I think being aware, being present, like Arvind said, I think is another important thing. So we build systems to be able to manage dialogue and manage communication channels, to be able to manage our people. So that's the other thing that I think we've done to be able to manage through these challenging times.
Excellent, thank you. I love that you highlighted listening, and really one of the keys, being present and listening. Thank you, Hepzibah. Prasenjit, you're next.
Thank you. I think all of us would agree that this is the time to really show your care, concern, compassion with your employees. I also feel that this is a great opportunity for us to actually seize the moment. People are not necessarily going to remember your predecessor or your successor, but they'll never forget us and what we did during this time if we are at leadership positions in organizations. And for a long time, we have at corporate India been like an ostrich. We have believed that run our business well, pay our taxes, and leave the rest to others. And I think that paradigm is changing. And I can see so many leaders, including my own people in my own organization, who are increasingly asking the question that, do we exist for the top line and bottom line, or do we exist for society, for a purpose? And I think more organizations and more leaders are going to be far more purpose focused. And some things have radically changed because of COVID, vis-a-vis where employees think and we deal with employees, but we'll talk about that later. Fundamental, I think, is the role of people in corporate India, including leaders, which extends beyond the boundaries of their own organizations.
Thank you. Yeah, societal change and contributing to society for businesses as a bottom line. Thank you. Lovely. Rajaram, we'd love to hear from you on this question.
Thank you. I think these challenging times have evolved over the last 1.5 years, I think. I mean, what started as a challenging time is now very different from what it is today. But certainly the first thing is that about acknowledging the fear and nervousness and anxiety that is there. And I think it's important to, know that it exists. And certainly for me, it is something that was there. And it's taken some time for it to be converted into, optimism and thriving on it. So I think that's the first thing which I would say is important. The second is that how do you convert the feeling of being threatened to being a feeling of being challenged? I think that's an important opportunity at this particular time. But I think the most important thing I'm seeing in these times is to make choices which are very clear, because there is an overdose of, transformational advice. There is a lot of, options which are there. And I think leaders must make very, very clear choices about what is the most important thing to do right now. And that is an important thing for us, for example, in the kind of business where we are, where it is, critical life-saving medicines, supplying them. It is very clear that, when you take out all the fluff, then the most important thing is to make sure that there is supply of medicines, there is safety of employees, and there is service to the patients who need it. So if you can focus on what is most important, then I think you can live through these times with, a lot more clarity. And of course, you're always balancing, do you deliver or do you develop for the future? I mean, I'm thinking, how do you sort of create that balance between today and tomorrow? This is what is a new challenge for us, in these times.
Great, thank you. Focusing on the most important for sure. We appreciate that. Thank you. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Velumani, same question. How have you defied challenging times and how?
I am 62. Thank you very much. I am 62 years old. What I have learned in these last 2 years is double than what I learned in my first 60 years. So challenging was the situation. We never did the RT-PCR test we were asked to do. In 400 days, we are the world's largest RT-PCR testing private laboratory. So when this calamity struck, I told my people, look, either you can look as an opportunity or look it as a threat. And there is a song in Tamil, which I translate in English. If you see a stone, you can't see a God. But in it, if you have seen a God, you then don't see a stone. So this made my people to understand we have a transformation opportunity. And in fact, we have transformed completely a healthcare company. We can't afford to sleep 400 days, no holidays, no holy days. So we were 24/7 working. I must tell you, this has been the most learning experience for all my managers. None of them went home for first 3-4 months when lockdown was there. In fact, it has been a great, like a university, learning, giving, taking. Everybody is willing to work in any department told. Trust me, 12.5 lakh specimen, open it, live virus inside. You do the test and you report it every day before 24 hours are over. Otherwise, your government will seal your laboratory under Pandemics Act. Oh God, what a temperature it was and what a kind of pressure it was. But I am proud to tell my entire team with a mean age of 25 years and very powerfully executed. Lot of decision had to be taken. Generally, people give layoffs when such a situation comes. My 1,200 numbers jumped to 2,500 numbers, and my turnover jumped from 400 crores to 650 crores. It was a great opportunity. But having said that, lot of emotional stress, lot of desperate calls, stressful calls, night 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, phones are ringing. Patient is not admitted, patient is in the gate, please release the report. Oh, this is an emotional turmoil. We also have lost a lot of family members of our employees. Having said that, the bottom line is never give up. Everything will pass soon, and prepare yourself even for the third wave, which could be even much bigger. This is how I have put in a lot of kind of motivation. Whatever words you use, it could be coaching, it could be counseling, it could be mentoring, it could be training, it could be all put together. I am a CEO, and somebody said CEOs cannot be good coaches, but I must tell you, I'm a very powerful storyteller. I have managed to create a good positive impact in my employees and in my organizations in this last 400 days. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's inspiring, right? What has happened in your company and so needed in these times. So appreciate that. Great. So I had an opportunity to meet with these 5 wonderful panelists earlier, and we've developed a question to ask each one of them. It's a little bit of a different question for each one, but it does relate to coaching. And again, we're gonna start alphabetically just because it will make it kind of easier to make sure everybody gets the time that you need to speak. So Arvind, for you, Priya mentioned that you've achieved an ACC credential with ICF, so you've studied as a coach. And I'm wondering, how has coaching, both your training and working with your coaching skills, how has that impacted you both as a person and as a professional?
Thank you, Pat. Actually, my coaching journey started almost 8 years ago in my previous company, where I was going through a big leadership transition. I got promoted into a global role. And overnight, my role changed from that being focused on India to about 7 or 8 different countries, from about 1,000 people to about 6,000 plus employees across multiple cultures. I was replacing someone who had been in that business for 16 years and had all deep relationships. And also, I was taking over where I was superseding a lot of my peers who became part of my leadership team. So really the challenge in front of me was, and I got, at that time, someone suggested, why don't you take on a coach because it'll help you with the transition. I didn't really know much about coaching, but I got an executive coach to help me with that. Long story short, I went through personal coaching. I understood what coaching was. It opened my horizon to a world of possibilities and potential. I used that to apply that to team coaching for my own team to help them transition through getting me as a supervisor, right? And we used team coaching to set up operating principles of how we would operate as a team to create a safe environment where people could come in and, if they have any issues, there could be fish on the table very easily without any fear or any implied emotions there. And then we use that same opportunity to work on a North Star or vision for the organization, right? And through that process, I discovered that coaching is a superpower that every leader and every organization must invest in and have in their repertoire of tool set. And we started embedding coaching top down across my entire organization. And again, long story short, in about 7 years, that organization grew to about 9,000 people. It went from being seen as a supplier and a service provider to an innovation-led organization. And more importantly, the engagement, productivity, recognition, all of that actually rose multiple folds. So the journey started from an individual standpoint, went into team coaching, and then it went into culture transformation. So it kind of went through everything that Shripad laid out over there. But none of that would have happened. And if you ask the personal question, it has been personally extremely transformational for me as an individual. I went from being a micromanager to someone who can, scale up and down. I went from someone who was used to a tell way of managing to more a balanced way of where there is an ask, there is a tell, and there is a directing depending on the context and the situation. Of course, coaching is not the be all and end all, but you learn to, dance in the moment, as we say, between whether it's coaching or whether it's mentoring or whether it's directing. More importantly, my listening improved. This whole concept of being present and being respectful for everyone really improved. And in today's world, we talk so much about being inclusive and diversity and all that. Coaching is probably one of the most inclusive, things that is out over there. So much so that it then automatically fuels diversity and leads to innovation. So yeah, as a professional, I think it really helped me make that shift, right, into a leader when I was going through a big transition. And I think everyone going through a career transition or role change or anything, all organizations and every individual must have a coach. It's not about fixing a problem, it's about unleashing your potential. And as a personal thing, I think my relationships became better. And my first coaching goal was really to have Buddha-like response to minor irritations in life, right? That was my first coaching goal. I'm still on that journey. I haven't really, it's a journey. I think it's if you continue on that, but it's been transformational to say the least.
Wow. So we've had, I think Pat has dropped off, but go ahead and finish your speaking, Arvind. You were saying something, you want to continue that?
No, I'm done. Yeah, that was, so in terms of professional and personal impact. It's been truly transformational in every aspect, I think, and every person who's going through a big transition, whether in their personal life or professional life, I think coaching, as Shripad laid out, everyone must have a coach.
All right. So building from there, from what Arvind shared here, thank you so much for that reaction, for, your, okay, that's not bad, sorry. So thank you so much for sharing that, Arvind. Moving on from there, I'd like to ask Hepzibah. Hepzibah, what has your experience been in adopting coaching, not only on a personal level, but also in your sharing coaching with your teams and having that coaching approach with them?
Yeah. I was thinking of it. I was thinking, if you look at careers, most people tend to do very well in the first half of their careers. People learn very quickly, they grow very quickly. But the pace of growth slows down in the second half, And I think one of the most important skills that you need, to manage challenges and to manage your leadership in the second half of your career is emotional intelligence. And I think, like all skills, this is a muscle and you have to build it. And this doesn't happen organically, or it doesn't happen by just spending time on the job. You need very deliberate strategies and interventions to build this muscle. And I kind of benefited from organizational interventions, including my own personal investment, actually, to build this muscle over the years. I strongly advocate and believe, invest in yourself. I tell everybody in my company, it's not just about what the company does for you. You've got to invest in yourself. In fact, a couple of years ago, I also learned coaching myself. And we tend to focus a lot on the outside stuff. We're very selective about the kind of education we want. We want to educate ourselves on topics like hard skills, on technology, on scientific stuff, but not the internal muscle building. And one of the things that coaching really did quite brilliantly for me was to up my self-awareness. And I think that's critical to being a better leader. And I think one of the early interventions I had, it helped me recognize and acknowledge what comes in the way. And I can tell you that is a liberating thing, because, we tend to like having mentors. We don't like mirrors. We don't have too many mirrors in our life, because we like to hear the things that we want to hear. We don't like to hear the things that we need to hear. And I think one of the things, one of the exercises I remember the coach had given me at that time, some blind spot exercise or whatever, I discovered, for example, one of the big insights that I had was one of my greatest strengths was also a weakness. Now, you would never have that perspective, when you actually look in life, I would have never had that perspective. So I thought it was a very, very liberating thing. And just by understanding that, recognizing that, I think that process helps you not only recognize it, it helps you also acknowledge it. And I think that's important, because you can't have change if you don't acknowledge stuff. And I think that acknowledgement helped me, embrace it, calibrate my approach, and therefore I was able to manage with my younger leaders much better. I think I've talked about listening as a skill. I mean, I can tell you it's the most valuable skill for win-win outcomes of building co-creation. I think coaching helped me build muscle on that, understand that, appreciate that. And in my business, that skill, for example, whether it's managing critical conversations, managing, conflicts, managing win-win outcomes, managing stakeholders, even selling difficult ideas, that is the skill. I mean, it's a life skill. I can't advocate it anymore than, I think it's one of the most important skills that everybody should have. And I think coaching for me, whether it's working on your self-limiting beliefs, and I honestly believe a lot more people have internal blocks than environment. I think the environment is a lot more welcoming than we give it credit for. A lot of the issues are actually internal. I also think it's helped me over the years to self-manage better. For example, when I took over Bombay office, since we're talking about challenges, it was a huge office. And I felt like, had I taken over the office or had the office taken over me? Because it was such a massive operation. And I remember through self-management at that time, because I had also learned some skills, I was able to distill an insight for myself to say being accessible and being available were two different things. And the minute you have a distinction and an understanding of that, you're able to take back control. So I think over the years, it's really, really helped me. And after I learned a bit about coaching, because I honestly think people don't get what it is, you have to have a really fine appreciation of it. After I learned what it is, I must say that it's really changed my approach to my people. So for example, when I work with the second level right now, I understand that it's also helping them build their muscle. It's not about just helping them all the time. So as a leader, I would jump in to help people all the time. But I think now I calibrate about there are times when you have to help people and times when you've got to help people help themselves. Because I think people have inner wisdom and resourcefulness that they don't even realize. And just by turning the conversation and getting them to tap into their own insights and finding their own solutions, I think you'll build a much more, I think you'll help people transform much better. So I think, this is my tryst with coaching and my appreciation and understanding of it. And I think it's one of those really powerful and important tools that needs to be integrated into everyone's, development, personal or organizational.
Fantastic, Hepzibah. That was lovely. And Pat has joined us, but I'll sort of continue until she gets spotlighted and ready. She must be really shaken up with all this sign out. I really love the fact that you said, this self-awareness and this observation that one has of oneself, and being able to decide when to let them, sort of manage, and when to manage them and let them grow and find their own resourcefulness. And lovely. Pat, are you ready? Hey, welcome back.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. My laptop quit on me, and I'm on my iPad now, so excuse excuse the ceiling and the fan and all of that. But I don't know, Priya, have you called on someone else?
Yeah, so Pat, we just finished with Arvind and he shared his piece. And then I've also got Hepzibah to share about how coaching affected her leadership style in her organization and how it impacted her personally as well. So we now move on to the next person.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And apologies for tech issues. Prasenjit, your question, what challenges did you face when introducing coaching into your organization?
Well, for me, it is partly my organization, but we have also worked with approximately 100 organizations where we have introduced elements of coaching. We don't call it coaching, by the way, and there's a reason for that. One of the big challenge that we face is this belief that you have to go through 5-day workshops, you have to do something like master coaches training programs and stuff like that. But the fact is that we want thousands of managers, including middle managers, anybody who has people working under him or her, to become an effective, have some kind of effective coaching skills. So we have to demystify it. So therefore, some things are basic, which we cannot change. For example, you have to believe in the potential of the other person. And the reality is that it doesn't matter what kind of assessment you want to do. Almost everyone has far more potential than what he or she has realized at this point in time. So therefore, that's a fundamental belief. You would have to then help in building the self-esteem and give confidence and so on and so forth. Having said that, we just simplified it into 2 parts. We said you have to do only 2 things. Is there trust in the relationship? That is number 1. And if not, you have to work on building trust. And if you have trust in the relationship, is it visible in form of sustained results? Because people understand these 2 words very well in organizations. And very often you have people who have high trust, but who are not, for some reason, be able to inspire high performance. They are like my favorite uncle or my favorite aunt, we can call them avuncular in their approach. There are also task masters who are very, very driven by results, but I won't really trust him or her. And therefore there are burnout cases. So when we looked at this data, and we must have, interviewed about 8,000 to 10,000 managers, we realized that no, they don't fit into a particular profile. We could not come up and say that this is the ideal coaching profile of Indian managers. What we realized was something which was absolutely simple. Just to give you an example, there is this works manager, and I won't reveal the names of the companies because these are all our clients. So the works manager whose 360 says that he does not allow anybody to speak. There is a Monday morning meeting and he conducts the whole meeting like a dictator. Everyone agrees with him, and then they come back after a fortnight and the story gets repeated, but problems are not getting solved. So he came up with after a little bit of plodding, he came up with this idea. He said, we replace the table in the room with a circle with 10 footsteps, and each one is labeled, head of quality or head of maintenance and works manager. Every Monday, each one takes a step to their right. Now, if I am the head of quality, but I happen to be standing on the maintenance manager's footsteps, I have to now explain what maintenance department has done in the last 1 week. Now, this essentially means that I know next week I'm actually going to be the head of design, and therefore throughout the week I'm talking to the head of design, trying to figure out what all have you done. We made these commitments in design. Has it happened or not happened? Previously, I would say something, I'll switch off. I'm not really interested in what the design guy is doing. But this one thing did two things. It forced the works manager to stop speaking, because now whoever, you don't know who is now standing on the footsteps of the works manager. So if it is the head of production planning who is now on the footsteps of the works manager, he is conducting the meeting, right? And secondly, it forced everybody else to know far more about some other function. Now you may call it coaching in collaboration. We don't call it coaching in collaboration. We are simply saying that the best way for you to really convert knowledge and skills into behavior is figure out which are those practices and rituals which will reinforce a particular behavior till it becomes a habit, right? And for example, there is, and I'm just giving one more example before I end. There's this manager who in the current context borrowed one of the practices. One good thing about Great Place to Work and Great Manager Institute is we literally have, I don't know, millions of interesting practices. So every quarter they do a performance appraisal, but this guy is now every 6 months, he is doing a detailed health appraisal. Now he's got some parameters, and I was just, I asked somebody to send me a picture of that. He says, I want to know on fitness, sleep, exercise, food habits, on resilience, things like ability to handle setbacks, on personal interest, time with family, social connect, on social. Now, each one of his team members, they're actually managing a tracker. It's a very small app. And then he wants to see what's been your sleep pattern. Now, it's possible in some cultures. It is not possible in some other cultures. In this kind of a organization, the team members feel that the manager cares about them far more or before he's caring about the results. So therefore, before he cares about your performance, he cares about you as a person. Now, this is a practice. And I think the secret that we discovered to, to coaching being, leading to sustained results is, can we convert it into a ritual or a practice which enables the manager to do it in a consistent manner so that that behavior becomes a habit. And this is the single biggest discovery that we found as a solution to the resistance that we often face in organizations.
Lovely. What a great story about human beings and stepping into another's shoes, learning from that experience, and really terrific. You've done a great job. Thanks for sharing that. Rajaram, you're next, and your question is, who can benefit from coaching, and how can it impact individuals in their lives, not only in their work lives, but in general in their lives?
I think the obvious answer would be that it should benefit everybody, right? I mean, there is nobody who will not benefit from coaching. And I think in organization, I mean, I'll probably put a bit perspective around the organization which, I work with. I think there is one of the big challenges today we have is how do you sort of drive, a culture, a set of values in large organizations when people are not supervised? And therefore, like Dr. Velumani was saying, I mean, it's really about how do you get a culture going in a place where the organization philosophy, where the agenda of the CEO, the business which is required, is actually imbibed right across. And today, employees are far less comfortable with instructional approaches. I think it's a lot more about getting people to be empowered to do it. Now, if you want that empowerment to come, then I think coaching becomes a very critical input in order for that to happen. And I believe that it helps at every stage. If I were to take my own sort of example during my career, there was an early stage in your career when you're managing, right? It's all about allocating resources and getting the best. So the job of the manager was to allocate resources and get the best result from that. That time, you're not really leading people. As you begin to lead people, you suddenly realize that it's no more about, telling what to do, but it's about empowering people to get out, the best out of them. And that's where I think the first step of coaching comes. any people manager in any company, I think requires some degree of coaching support, right? In terms of, being trained how to coach. I think that's the first and I believe that coaching is actually taught. If you are not taught, then you have to be, a really gifted person to be able to coach naturally. Yeah, I think coaching needs to be taught. As I moved, further in the career, then you realize that, you come to certain transition points where coaching becomes very important. It's either taking up a responsibility which you haven't had before, or it's a new culture. And it's here that you get the next big piece of support. So in, big transitions, big organizational roles is the next place where coaching is, I think, very, very critical. I benefited a lot from it. And at that stage, self-awareness becomes very important. For example, in my case, I was anxious that, could I live up to this new job? I was, wanting to, I had worked with extremely good, bosses, and you're always under the thing of, will I live up to it? And at that stage, a good coach helped me find, a core to myself, made me feel comfortable and authentic, made me feel secure in my style of working. Right? So that's another stage which you get. Today, when we are in this kind of, a situation where we are working with employees who are remote, I have found that the fact that we've built a coaching culture is actually turned out to be our biggest strength, because it's no more about coaching for remedial measures. It's actually about coaching to help people adapt. And what coaching does in any company or any large organization is that over a period of time, it creates a psychological safety in the company, because there is feedback which is there, right? People are able to share. And therefore, when you want to implement a transformation, or you want to implement an agenda, it helps a lot to have several circles of trust in the company through whom you can actually deliver that. And I think, therefore, a coaching environment in any organization implemented at every level, certainly for anybody who's a people manager, is, I think, critical. And you will find this beneficial at every level. But if there's one thing I've picked up is you've got to be very gifted not to need formal coaching. Yeah. So.
Thank you so much. I loved your expression, circles of trust.
Yeah.
Creating circles of trust. There's really something to be said about that in organizations, in families, in schools. It can be really applied in almost anywhere. So thank you so much, Rajaram. So Dr. Velumani, my question for you is, you mentioned that many of your employees are quite young. Can you share a story about how coaching has helped you connect with them, with that work group particularly?
Actually, I was unemployed for a pretty long period. And whenever I went for an interview, in 50 interviews, I failed because everybody asked only one question: do you have experience? And I had finished my degree only 3 months back. I don't know how to manufacture experience. It is almost like asking a girl sitting in front of you whom you want to marry and asking her, how many children do you have? It is first job, then experience. No one had understood. So in 1978 itself, I took a decision. If I one day become an employer, I will only employ freshers. I won't take experienced. And today I have happiness to tell I haven't taken anyone experience into my organization. It's a 5,000 crore listed company, zero debt company. And I am extremely proud to tell, using only freshers, I could create the organization. So that's the power of the journey. I came with the 500 rupees in my pocket. I became an employer. First, I was unemployed, then employed in a private firm. Then I became a government employee. Then I became self-employed. Then I became an employer for 10,000 plus employees. Having said that, freshers means they first come thinking that it is also a college. Now we have to tell this is a company you are working. They will see me as a principal, not as a CEO. And they will expect They will think they are not paid salary and they are still paying fees. First, I have to tell them, gentlemen, I am now paying fees, salary for you. So from no learning, they paid fees. Now I am paying salary and I create a very huge knowledge. That's a great happiness for me. And as I said, the company is 27 years old. Employees are only 25 years old. Mean age of the employee is 25. My general manager started his career 25 years back, and my CEO also was my fresher. It's a very unique cultured organization where what we do make people to focus, make people to work in a system. It's a medical diagnostic industry. You should not think, in fact, some of our work people should not think. They have to exactly do what step 1 to step 10 taught. Make them clutter free, make them fearless, make them to see what you see. If they see what you see, you don't have to work, they only will work. So that's the ability of mine to make them to understand in the country what is in our industry, what is our company, in our company, what is your department, in your department, who are you, what you can become is what I have taught to entire manpower. Created an idiot-proof system to make sure that none of them can make mistake even if they wish to. And youngest company, most dynamic company. And also we have an error-free operation. We do 400,000 investigation a day. We count the number of errors per lakh, and it is the lowest in the industry. And we run a debt-free company. We are the fastest growing company for the last 25 years. I can keep on telling if you are interested in investing in my company, but let me tell you, all I have created only from freshers, full stop. I lived in, as an example, I have lived for the last 25 years in the laboratory. I don't have a house separate. I still have not bought a house, lived frugal. I made my people to think living simple is living powerful, and my people are very, very powerful. Thank you. Back to you, Pat.
Thank you so much. Wow, I am really inspired by the stories each of these leaders and people have told us about their lives, their businesses, the effect of coaching. And I apologize for my technological issue, and it shows I'm not the important person here. These panelists are the important person. So thank you so much for sharing. And Priya, I know there probably have been some questions on the chat, and we may have a few minutes to be asking some of the questions of the panelists from the chat.
Yes, that's right. So let's get into some of the questions. There's a question from Amit, who says, what is the difference between a mentor and a coach? Also, is it necessary for coach to closely oversee individual on a day-to-day working basis, as in day-to-day working environment? Anybody could choose to answer this.
I can make an attempt on this one for sure. I mean, I think, mentoring is normally a very intentional intervention, which is, and I think it was shared in the presentation as well. And it tends to be an intentional effort where somebody who is with some experience and more expertise gives an opportunity and guides another person. I think coaching, what we tend to find, I think, and the question is very right, is do you need to coach every day? The answer is really no, because if you look at today's world, you will not be able to supervise. I think you have such a distributed workforce today. People are just not meeting each other. So coaching is really more going to be about creating a culture of empowerment across the organization. I think it has got very little to do with, do you supervise the person or not. It is more to do with, are you teasing out insights, and are you able to create the ability of the opportunity for the person to discover where they can grow. So it's really about that area rather than about, supervision, control, which is really more about, management and, remedial sort of intervention. So that's the way we sort of see mentoring and coaching.
Thanks, Rajaram. There's a question from Shivaram. He says, does one choose the coach, or is it the coach who chooses his or her coachee or pupil? He's used the word. Does one choose the coach, or is it the coach who chooses the pupil? As a coach, when do you judge it is right to stay quiet, let the client work it out by herself? Who would like to go with that? Pat, would you like to answer?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. One of the most important things when a coach-client relationship is formed is that there's, I call it chemistry between the coach and client. So different organizations do it differently. Sometimes there's a panel of coaches that's interviewed by the person who's going to be coached by the client. And then there's a mutual understanding of, which might work best in terms of the chemistry. So I don't think there's one set way, whether it's the client selects the coach selects the client. It's kind of a partnership, as I think we think of coaching really as a partnership. And Priya, the second part of the question, there was a second question in there, I think.
Yes. He says that as a coach, when do you judge it is right to stay quiet and let the client work it out by themselves?
I think that's a really great question. A lot of insight comes in silence. And so one of the core competencies of coaching is asking powerful questions. And there's, many competencies, but that's one. And so sometimes asking that powerful question and then staying silent so that it's the client doing the work. I always say if the coach is doing more work than the client, you're not doing coaching. Right? It's the client's work to do, but those powerful questions can help.
Nice. There's a question from Shruti. She says, for individual coaching, does it help us to have a professional coach from the same fraternity, function, expertise, and background? Would you like to?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in this area, but I feel that if I were to personally choose, I would feel comfortable, because one of the things that I would look for in a coach is some kind of a proven, of course, we look at proven track record, we look at recommendations, but I feel personally that if someone has a basic understanding of the craft, of the area that I'm in, I would feel more confident, I think, of the coach. I don't think they have to, be an expert in my craft, but I think they have some understanding of it. I think gives me confidence. So I feel that when I would choose, I would probably gravitate towards a coach who has some understanding of my field.
Right.
I think that's sorry, I was just about to say something. I'm sort of inspired to take a contrarian view, and it all depends on what is the context of coaching, because a lot of the times coaching is actually really about guiding or directing or teaching, in which case that's not the kind of executive coaching that most people talk about when they say that you must ask open-ended questions. And sometimes actually not coming from the same profession. And that classic book that was there in the beginning that was being quoted, Tim Galloway's, who was coaching tennis tennis players. Actually, these were a bunch of guys who had no idea of tennis, who were recruited to coach tennis players, and they actually turned out to be really, really good, because not having the subject matter knowledge actually stopped their own biases from coming into play, and they had to rely completely on their ability to observe, help the person reflect. So I think it is contextual, and it probably can work both ways.
Yeah, like you said, it could be. I think it's just coming from my industry experience, and I tend to hear that a lot in my industry. So just sharing that.
Yeah, there was an interesting perspective that we got from one of the earlier panels we done, where it said that it's not about the same background. It's just about them understanding my playing field.
Yes.
Where I'm coming from. When I say something, do they understand the perspective? That's the only thing. Okay, so moving on to the next question, we have a question from Rajneesh Mathur who says, how are corporate leaders imbibing the spirit of coaching while you are warding off day-to-day challenges?
I can go with that. I
Yes,
think as Shripad laid it out initially, it's a tool, right? And you, in your toolkit, you have multiple tools. So depending on the context and the situation, you use what tool works best. But even in a, so for example, if there's a fire, in the middle of a fire, you won't use coaching, right? You probably use more directing, right? However, there's opportunities after the fire has happened to use those insights and learning and use coaching as a means of saying, okay, what could have been done differently, or what could we do? What were some of the insights and learning from that particular event that the team can carry forward? So I would really say that, yeah, there's no horses for courses here. There's no one glove fits the hand. You use whichever tool works best in that particular context. But coaching as a general, some of the elements of coaching can be used in every context to, depending on either as a post or a pre, to really glean the insight and learnings from that and build it into the organization.
If I may add, Priya, there is also
yes,
the
please, Rajaram, go ahead.
angle that I think it's becoming difficult to find an alternative, because the earlier way of, instructing and directing in organizations is tough now, because there is so much that leaders don't know. And if the rate of knowledge change has become so much that you just don't know enough to tell people in your teams what to do. So the best way really is to try and get them to discover it themselves. And one of the most useful tools for that is really coaching. And with the kind of, workforce which is coming in and people who are coming in, they're not very comfortable with instructional approaches all the time. And I think it's also important that we keep coaching. Therefore, in some sense, becomes the default tool now for it to be working.
Lovely. Moving on to the next question, we have a question from Amrita, and she says, this is a question to all the panelists, so anyone could and should answer. What is the role you see that coaching plays in these times? Dr. Velumani, would you like to go?
The question is very, very generic, so I thought it's difficult to answer, but coaching helps at every stage, at every age. I started coaching a 5th standard boy when I was in 6th standard. So coaching also you can do at any age. And I kept on coaching to one person below my class every year, and I kept scoring first mark throughout, and I finished the first class. So coaching is ultimately very vital, very important. And you call it training, mentoring, different names, but guiding somebody to be successful is what is the primary goal. I saw one question addressed to me in the screen scrolling. How do you, what makes your freshers to become general managers and CEOs?
Yeah, that's by Sudha Krishnan. She's asked that question.
Let me tell you, there are 3 kinds of people in any organization. One who doesn't have time for himself is not even fit to be an employee. Somebody has time only enough for him, not for anyone else. He is very ideal to be an employee. He can never become a leader. The one who has time for himself and for everybody only can become the leader. So I have seen in this last 25 years, who are those boys, girls who have time more for others also. So they move in a fast track. And the ones who don't have time adequate will move in a slow track. What we do in our organization 25 years continuously is, every year arrange the employees in each department in the descending order of their importance in the department. Top 20% elevate, bottom 20% eliminate, remaining 60% titrate. The organization becomes very powerful. You churn out most powerful people in the organization to become leaders, and then they become among the leaders, the biggest man becomes the CEO or CFO or COO. So that's a power of creating internally, organically, most powerful, and trust me, least risk decisions can be taken.
Thank you, Dr. Velumani. Anybody else would like to answer that question? That is, what is the role you see coaching plays in these times?
I can take a shot at it. I think the fundamental shift that, to my mind, that is happening is, you see, for some of us, Dr. Velumani might agree that during our time, the driver was for many people job security, because jobs were not very easily available, and there was a no vacancy sign that used to hang in most offices. So the currency was power, because if you become a senior manager, you can actually sort of deny the leave application that somebody puts in front of you. You have all those kinds of things that people used to enjoy. And then what happened is, thanks to Great Place to Work and so many other organizations here, that whole thing shifted. So the market, the currency became employee experience. So or rather the market became employee experience, and the currency was career. Thanks to COVID, what the shift that is happening right now is that it is a market for relevance. Because what is relevant today in terms of skill is not going to be relevant tomorrow. Each one of us right now has a second career. We may not be really good at it, but we are already at it. I mean, if, for example, every day 1 hour I spend on understanding the basics of diversity and inclusion. I'm going into things like social contract theories and concepts of justice, philosophy, and all kinds of stuff. And the reason is very simple, because I see my own career as not just an extension of what I have done in the past, but I have to invest in a second career, sometimes a third career, even while I'm at the peak of the first career. So therefore, the currency has become learning. And it is so much easier now to convince people that learning is not what the organization is going to dish out to you. Learning is what you have to do yourself. And therefore, in our e-learning courses, where the completion rate was 5%, 10%, has jumped to 50% today. And that may not sound like a great deal, but compared to the past, it is actually a hugely significant kind of a jump. And I think if learning has become the new currency, needless to say, 70% of the learning is because of the job, because of your job-related experience. It is not because of classroom or even e-learning training programs. And that 70% learning can only happen if you have a good coaching process, or you have one or more multiple people who play the role of a coach.
Nice. Lovely. Thank you for that, Prasenjit. I'd like to move to the next question very quickly. We have a question from Puneet. He says, what's the future of coaching and a coaching culture in corporates? How do you see this evolving going forward?
Yeah, Arvind, I think as everyone has already alluded to it, I think this is the era of coaching. I think coaching means as one of the tools, but a very powerful tool and a foundational leadership skill across the organizations, but also as a tool for culture transformation. And I think the time is very ripe because of the kind of environment we are, where it's a distributed workforce, where it's a virtual workforce, where people, as Rajaram pointed out, no one likes to be told what to do. So the instructional way of doing things is gone. The command control kind of organizations are moving away to more smaller, lean, agile teams, almost like a SWOT approach, people coming together. So in all that context, I think coaching kind of starts taking prominence. And again, everyone doesn't have to be trained as a coach, but it's about coaching as a skill, both for the employee or the larger organization per se, but also for the people leaders and the managers and across the organization. So I think this area is going to see a huge growth, and there's going to be a supply-demand issue.
In fact,
if I can, sorry.
Yes,
sorry. Yeah, sorry, well, Raja, were you trying to say something? Did I interrupt?
No, please go on, please. I think Dr.
No,
Velumani.
actually, I wanted to add to what Arvind was saying, because I think that we need to raise the stage of coaching a lot more. While I think the time has come and lots of people do understand it, I think there is more work to be done to raise the stature of coaching in the industry. To really, I think successful people get the benefits of it, but people don't really talk about it. When people talk about coaches, you see sporting and everyone talks about sport and the coaches behind the sport, but we don't talk about enough. We don't spotlight enough the value of what coaches have given to make people successful. So I think there is perhaps, as the relevance of it's going up, I think there is need for us to actually, and I'm, for example, an evangelist and an ambassador for coaching in my company. And I think there's more of that needs to be done, I think, as an industry, because people tend to talk about profits and product. But, I think that the focus on people, people get rewarded. People should get rewarded for the people that they build, right? So when you look at people's KPIs, half the times it's about profits and products. Nobody ever tells a guy that, oh, you've developed so many people, now you're going to get the, extra for that. So I feel there's some work to be done in that area, because I think there's still some barriers and a lack of understanding of what coaching is. So while I think it's happening at certain levels, I think there's more that needs to be done in that area.
Lovely. Dr. Velumani, you were saying something.
It's very simple. I am oldest man in this group. In my days, there was no coaching, zero coaching. There was not even guides available in printed format. But today, if you see, Baiju is coaching, and coaching is everything. It starts at LKG, coaching. So I must tell you, there is a great future for coaching, because all coached, once coached, needs coaching lifelong. So when they enter into a company, they need coaching. And then when they start a business, they need coaching. So literally speaking, the generation after generation, coaching is becoming more important and a very big need, and it has a great future.
Wonderful. Rajaram, you were saying something too.
I think I just want to add, we increasingly, coaching is not going to be about performance management, which is the typical thing which is done in organizations that, it is meant to manage. I think it's all going to be about development. And the fact is, we don't hire employees for their weaknesses, right? When you hire somebody, you hire them for their strengths. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the organization to play the strengths of the employee and develop their strengths. And I think if you recognize as a responsible organization that I have got an employee in my team because of the strengths which they brought at the time when we hired them, then it's our responsibility to develop those strengths. And I think if you have that attitude, then you will automatically find that coaching is the way to go ahead. And performance management just becomes a very classical HR process. That's about all. Yeah.
Nice, very nice. There's a question here from Parinita. She says, what is necessary? What is the necessary quality most needed in coaches today, especially when coaching clients through change, turbulence, and related challenges of today? In her opinion, she says it's empathy, compassion, and gratitude. What do you all think about that?
She only has given answers. We all agree with that answers.
Okay.
Not really.
You agree with her answer. Okay. So basically, that is what they need to have: empathy, compassion, and gratitude. Anybody would like to add to that in any way?
Patience.
Patience.
Perseverance.
Resilience is something that's coming to me as I'm saying this and hearing these words. But thank you. Move to the next question. There's a question from Preeti Gupta. She says, what's holding back organizations from investing in coaching, considering it's a much needed now more than ever before? How can we make coaching a pull factor rather than a push factor?
I think that's a multi-dimensional answer to that. Yeah. But one of the things, historically, the barrier has been key leadership, having a fixed mindset. Right. And I think as you need more leaders with growth mindset, because when you go to a leader who doesn't understand anything about coaching and you talk about coaching and you talk about, listening and other things, a leader who's successful and with a fixed mindset saying, I've been so successful, why do I need to change or why do I need to improve?
Happens all the time.
So happens all the time. How much ever we say people are open, etc. that's the attitude. Or people say, oh, it's all about just asking questions, so what I'm going to get out of that. So I think the one part is the leaders with growth mindset will create the kind of an environment where organizations can really invest in coaching and will see the need for that. But I think equally, that's why we have charter chapters and chapters like ours and ICF communities. I think there is also a burden of responsibility on us to evangelize, coaching more and bring out what coaching means. As Prasenjit said, I think we have to demystify it. I think when you use the word coaching, maybe many people, get put off by it. Maybe you just emphasize on elements of coaching within the organization to drive the culture out, right? Not make it look something which is very mysterious and something big out there. So I think there are multiple, it's all of that. It's us pushing the concept of coaching out there. It's making more people familiar with that. It's getting out stories. Stories always help, right? Success stories. When you talk about that, how coaching has helped someone in their leadership transformation, I think those really help. And people say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Maybe I can reach out to a coach. So I think it's all of those.
Lovely. Would anybody else like to add to that, Pat or anyone, or can I move to the next question? All right. So my next question is from Vijay Lakshmi, and she says, as leaders, would you view coaching as an expense or an investment? Would you prefer to invest more in training, coaching, or mentoring in your organization? Or is it different at different levels? It's like a complex set of questions, but all similar.
So maybe I can take
Yes,
a shot at with some couple of case studies. So a very large Indian bank acquires another bank, which is almost 2/3 its size, another large bank. So it's a acquisition, and now there are combined teams. So in a branch manager could be from bank A, but bulk of the team members could be from bank B. So the big challenge that they have is how can the branch managers coach in a manner that there is collaboration amongst the teams, which have now come from two different organizations. And therefore, we find it very, very more easy to convince management when we say that we are going to certify your branch managers, instead of saying that we are going to coach your branch managers, even though we may use the same principles and we give them tools which borrow from coaching. But what does that mean? It means that there are three things that the branch managers have to consistently display as behaviors and in this coaching intervention, and I'm calling it certification. One is that they have to be very good at listening. They have to really know how to get their teams to collaborate with each other. And because it is a mixed team, they must be able to celebrate successes and early success. So these are the three concrete goals. And then you work with the branch managers. As usual, you say that these are the principles. There is some amount of e-learning, some amount of, it's called a hybrid process, facilitator-led kind of learning process. But again, break it down into some rituals and practices. So a branch manager A goes and he implements something called as Ek Din Ka Nayak. What is Ek Din Ka Nayak? For those of you who are not familiar with Hindi, emperor for a day. Every alternate Friday, one person in the branch pretends to be the branch manager, sits on the chair of the branch manager, and does all the review meetings, including collections review, customer review. Except the swiping authority, he does or she does almost everything else. At 5 o'clock, along with samosa and tea, he or she actually talks about what all needs improvement in the branch. So amazing, amazing stuff. You might have been in the branch for 7 years, 8 years. You were blind to all those things that you noticed in one day. So now Ek Din Ka Nayak, caught on, and then it was observed that the branches which were doing Ek Din Ka Nayak, by the way, it's a bank in Mumbai, so therefore, hopefully we'll publish the case study. They actually reported that their CASA deposits were going up higher than other banks in Western India. There are a couple of net interest income, the frontline attrition. Now, these were tangible things that the head of retail banking understands very well. And when this person reviewed it for those branches, and I'm saying this person because I don't want to give away which is the bank. So the decision was taken that we have to extend it to 1,500 branches. And HR came and said, we don't have the budget. And this person, the head of retail banking, said, sorry, this is not HR budget, this is business budget. So don't worry, I'm going to sanction the budget. You just keep tracking two figures, productivity and attrition. Now, I don't know whether it is the traditional way of looking at coaching or is it a cynical way of looking at coaching, but the bottom line is that this process actually produced business results which made it that much easier to convince the decision makers.
You know, Priya, if I were to just build on Prasenjit, I think corporates want a problem that needs a solution. Yeah, coaching is one of the things where there is a solution, but we're not very clear what's the problem it's solving. Unlike training or mentoring, it's fairly clear that there's a problem, there's a gap, and which we solve for. And corporates tend to be comfortable when there is a problem to be solved.
Right.
The important thing for us to position coaching is to say, what's the problem it is solving? Yeah, because very often it tends to be defined in a way that it is not training, it is not mentoring, it is developing. So what exactly is the problem you're solving? Versus the typical positioning which happens for training. And I think that's what we've got to learn, to say that, it's like a hammer searching for a nail. So I'm saying, or a nail searching for a hammer, whichever way you want to put it. Yeah. So I think that's the important one to look at coaching for corporate. If you're able to, therefore, you need to show the return on it, or in some sense, the outcome of it, because it's certain. And I think that's where we've got to land the positioning of coaching much better for corporate.
Yeah, so I've got, in fact, a follow-up question to that one. There's a question from Johnny who says, so how do you calculate this ROI of coaching? And also there's something here that I can't get the name right now. Yeah, Sushil says, what is the take on the panel on creating a common understanding about coaching with top management? Pat, would you like to go with that?
Let me unmute here. I come back to your comment, Rajaram, about sometimes the answer to the issue that is being faced is training. And that absolutely for sure. One of the issues in organizations is, how do you translate training from the classroom or the Zoom or whatever method you're using into actual behavior? And so, people can do it in the classroom, they can say, but sometimes the behavior doesn't change when they go back to the, environment in their work. So that's the gap that coaching can fill. And what is the return that you're looking for? And sometimes, organizations are using climate surveys, for example. If one of the issues is turnover, they're looking at turnover rates. So there's many ways of looking at that return on investment question. But I comment that, you bring up all of the different modalities that can be used. It's not just coaching, but coaching can fill the gap between training and performance.
Right. My next question is from Puneet. He says, isn't it time we looked at coaching as possibly the only powerful inside-out transformational enabler to unleash full potential of individuals, teams, and organizations, rather than use any one of the tools? Rather than using it as just one of the tools. Do I have a yes or a no answer? Somebody.
As we've discussed, I think it's one of the tools, because there are certain assumptions you make when you're coaching, right? That the presence of knowledge exists. If there's no knowledge, there's no, the person can't find answers on their own. So there is a place for mentoring, there's a place for training, there's a place for directing. As I gave the analogy, in the middle of the fire, coaching initially is an investment. It takes time before it starts yielding results. Over a period of time, it becomes more efficient and effective, but initially it's seen as an investment. So, in the middle of a fire, you can't be coaching people. The house will burn down around you, right? So yeah, it is contextual, but can you create coaching as a foundational skills across the organization, wherein you use it more, use those elements more in a much more magnified way, and raise the collective thinking and the innovation of the organization? Absolutely, yes.
Nice, lovely.
Yeah.
There's a question here for Prasenjit. He said it says that, do you see corporates moving to team coaching from individuals, one-on-one coaching?
Well, the answer is no. The positioning and the need for both is very different. And one-on-one individual coaching is not going to give way to team coaching. However, team coaching is also going to increase. And on the previous question, just to take one half a minute, at the risk of taking a little bit of a contrarian view to many people, I'm not sure about this internal transformation that happens because of coaching, because I can't see it half the time, but I can see behavior change that happens because of coaching. And therefore, in my organization, for example, there are so many carrots and sticks any organization has. Nobody in my organization can get promoted if their employee engagement score is below a particular threshold. And by the way, we measure employee engagement on a daily basis, not on a yearly or monthly or quarterly basis. Now, when you go through coaching, very often the end objective is change in a particular behavior, which actually impacts some outcomes. So for example, a leader who is not going to become a section head or a business head unless he knows how to be more collaborative, unless he knows how to listen better. Now, these are behavior changes. So the coach is going to work with the leader, and the leader is incentivized. He knows it's very, very important for him. And this is, and therefore, and they're, people are very smart. So they will be able to show that behavior consistently. So I would not hazard to say that there has been a transformation internally in this person. It does happen. I'm very happy it does happen. My own case, however, is different. For years, I have conducted coaching skills workshops. I have done master coaching certification for others. So if you ask me to display great listening skills, empathy, warmth, respect, genuineness, concreteness, paraphrasing, summarizing, asking open-ended, divergent, convergent questions, confrontation, I'm going to be able to do that pat. But for years, my 360 says Prasenjit is not a good listener. And he comes and he butts in between. And after I became CEO, it says, no, he is also judgmental. So therefore, to force me to change my behavior, my organization had to come with the same recipe. They had to say, Prasenjit, these are the 3 practices which you have to practice for the next 6 months, after which we are going to take feedback from people. Has your listening actually behavior improved or not improved? And use these practices or these rituals to really work on that. So that really helps. So I'm sorry, coming back to the actual questions. Sorry, I was digressing a little bit. If you can just repeat the question.
Do you see corporates moving to team coaching from individual one-on-one coaching?
So what we do is for middle managers and for first-time managers, because coaching, if you really want professionals to come as coaches, is also very expensive. So therefore, for middle managers and first-time managers who actually, there is a strong need there because that's a gap area, it is often not possible for you to have an individual one-on-one coach. So when you design an intervention, it is often possible that you have 25 odd managers in a particular batch going through a process, particularly if the organization defines which are the areas. For example, when Siemens, which is a published case study, I can quote it, went through this entire coaching process for 800 managers, their tagline was, are you a Siemens LTD manager? LTD is not limited. Are you a Siemens listening, thanking, developing manager? These are the 3 skills that they wanted. So a batch of 25 can come together, they can practice, and thanks to the means that we have today in terms of technology, they come together once in a month. There is a trained facilitator, they share some stories. For example, and just my last half a second before I close, one person says that I started this entire forum called I mean, who was the guru of Pandavas? I forget. The teacher of Pandavas, right?
Dronacharya.
Drona. So his program is Drona. And Drona is a beautiful program when developing people. Remember listening, thinking, developing. And only problem is he is the Drona. And every Monday, now it is up to him to teach something. After 5 such Mondays, he realized that he has had enough. So then he said, don't be a Ekalavya is the program. Now by turn, everybody is going to teach everybody else. Now that kind of insight comes even in a group. When you're discussing real life problems in a group, a trained facilitator is also able to not only do some amount of group coaching, but also share learning from each other.
So we are almost, thank you so much for that, Prasenjit. Maybe one last question. There are 3-4 more, but I'm going to have to stop. One last question from Anuradha Sant. She says, what best practices have you seen in organizations related to coaching, which have made it successful, which have made them successful?
I can give an example. In my previous organization, which was Accenture, performance management changed to performance achievement, right? And it moved away from putting people on bell curves from a performance standpoint to focusing on the individual's potential. And there was a lot of focus, without using the term coaching, there was a lot of focus on inculcating some of the skills of, how you unleash potential of people, how do you, ask questions, how do you listen, and all of that aspect at the grassroots levels as an enabler to, implementing that performance achievement. That was one example that I thought I would share.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add to that?
I think mandatory senior management coaching, because unless it starts with the leadership, it does not actually cascade down. So I think what's very important is that you need the sponsors to be those who have experienced it. And I think that's one of the practices which is there in, at least organizations like ours, which is there. And that then, goes down. The second is normally the definition of the role of a people manager must include coaching as being a key part of it. So if you have, KPIs around not just what you deliver on business targets, but also on people engagement, as well as in terms of retention, things which are related to people practices and, the 360 survey, that's the other piece which sort of comes in. So it's how do you institutionalize the process and how do you make sure that senior management sponsorship is there throughout. The biggest limitation, I think, which we generally experience in organizations is time. And I think it is an important thing because training or the more structured ones come with an allocated time slot. Yeah, they come. Coaching is not one of those which is there. Coaching needs to be a continuous process and therefore will get always neglected. And therefore, it's very important to find how do you institutionalize time in the coaching philosophy of the organization. Some companies like ours, for example, have a mandatory 1 hour block, in all calendars at times, during the course of the week, etc. So I think you need to, it is in some sense, a bit more prescriptive if you want to institutionalize coaching. It cannot be left in an organization to, generally adopt it. If you believe in it, then leadership, KPIs in HR processes, and institutionalizing time. These are 3 things which help, organizations do it well.
Awesome. With that, I am going to have to close because we are already at the top of the hour and we had committed to close by 8. There are a couple of questions, but I'm sorry, we'll have to, do that some other time and some other way. Thank you very much, all the panelists and Pat and Shripad for sharing not only your insights, your knowledge and your wisdom and examples and experiences of what coaching can do, the kind of change it can bring to lives, to transform organizations, transform, teams, the way they work, build cohesiveness, etc. Kindly fill in and do please take the feedback poll. This is really important for us. We would love to hear what your feedback is on this session. We will be sharing the recording of this entire session via the ICF Mumbai YouTube channel The YouTube link is going to be pasted into the chat box as I speak. And please subscribe and turn on notifications so that by clicking on the bell icon so that you can get notified every time a recording is put out there. So thank you so much once again for all that you have done today for not only the chapter, but for coaching in general and for, say, society in general, by sharing all your insights. All your lovely stories and examples have been so meaningful. Before we close and while the feedback is coming in, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to share before we close? Anybody, any of the panelists?
No, just a quick thank you to inviting and having us share our experiences.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a request while everybody is
Yes.
still filling up the feedback form, which I would urge everyone to still do, because that's really important for us to gather. I would request everyone to please come back on camera, and you could get your gallery view in place so that I can take a little picture for our archives. So I would really request everyone to please switch on your cameras and be patient with me, because I may have a few screens to click. And I would really love to capture this moment for us. And I will continue to request you to please fill up the feedback poll. That's exceedingly important for us. All right, so I seem to have 2 screens to click. So with everyone, a pretty smile on your faces. Okay, screen 1 done. Let me take the second screen. I already see somebody else clicking as well, so that's good.
That's me, just to make certain that.
Excellent. No, because I know I've no. So, okay, screen 2 still to happen. So please don't switch off your cameras yet. All right.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here, staying till the end. It's been such a success to see not only the kind of questions, but the kind of comments and all, of course, the story sharing and the experience sharing from everyone. Thank you for being here. And please get coaching to be more a part of your life than ever before. There are coaches out here in the chapter, across the country, across the globe, who are willing to be there to help you. All you need to do is reach out. And with that, I'd like to sign off. Thank my team who's been part of this whole experience with me, putting it together. Have a great evening and a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care,
Thanks
everybody.
and
See you.
good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night and stay safe, all of you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.